After years of service, a Navy SEAL and his German Shepherd were finally given a long leave from the military. On the road back to his lonely cabin near Lake Superior, Alden stopped at Blue Spruce Cafe to rest after hours of driving. But the moment Alden sat down, Vesper reacted, not with wild barking, but by silently blocking a man named Colton Sayers. Vesper had sensed what everyone else missed. Colton had stolen wallets, cash, keys, and a red medicine pouch from an elderly woman. But cafe manager Paula Larkin misunderstood Alden and Vesper, fearing they were disturbing her customers and damaging the cafe's reputation. When Officer Brent Galloway arrived, he judged Alden by his worn coat, snowy boots, and tired face.
I'm just passing
without
through.
checking the
Leave me
camera
alone.
or watching Colton. Tell us where you're watching from. Share your thoughts after the story. And please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. The road north of Lake Superior looked as if the whole world had been covered in powdered glass. Snow lay thick on the shoulders of the highway, bright beneath a pale winter sun. Pine trees rose on both sides like dark green cathedral walls, their branches bent under white weight. Far beyond the trees, the lake appeared in brief silver flashes, cold and enormous, like a mirror made for giants. Alden Rusk drove through it all in an old black pickup that carried more years than shine. At 58, Alden was still built like a man the wind had failed to move. He stood around 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, a solid chest, and the quiet strength of someone shaped less by gym mirrors than by long marches, frozen mornings, and years of carrying weight without complaint. His square face was weathered and sun-browned, marked by lines that seemed carved by both saltwater and sleeplessness. His eyes were a deep blue-gray, calm at first glance, but heavy with things he rarely gave names to. His dark brown hair was cut short, slightly longer on top, naturally tousled where the winter wind had pushed it back. Silver touched both temples. A trim beard shadowed his jaw, clean enough to show discipline, rough enough to prove the road still owned part of him. He wore a faded green military jacket that had lost its sharp color years ago, a brown-gray thermal shirt beneath it, dark jeans, old brown boots, and a scratched military watch with a faint crack across the glass. Every few miles his thumb found that watch, not because he needed the time, because touching it reminded him to breathe. On the passenger seat beside him lay Vesper, a 6-year-old German Shepherd, with a black and gold coat that looked almost royal in the winter light. A heavy black saddle ran from his shoulders down his back, while his chest and legs glowed honey gold. His muzzle was dark, his eyes amber and watchful, and a thin golden streak ran slightly off-center from his forehead toward the bridge of his nose, like a little blade of sunlight trapped in fur. One small nick marked the edge of his left ear. Beneath his chin was a pale cream patch that only showed when he lifted his head. Vesper was not a loud dog. He did not bark at passing trucks or press his nose to the window like a pet excited by snow. He rested with his head low, eyes half open, calm as a sentry who had learned that danger often arrived dressed as nothing at all. He was Alden's service dog now. Before that, he had been something harder to explain. Alden glanced at him and felt the old ache move beneath his ribs. Vesper had followed him through years when commands were short, sleep was thin, and silence was sometimes the only mercy left. After Alden's long leave was approved, people told him he should be grateful. Rest, they said. Go home. Enjoy peace. But peace was not a room a man simply entered. Peace was a language Alden had forgotten. There was no wife waiting at the cabin near the lake, no grown children leaving porch lights on, no welcome home banner stretched across a doorway. There was only a small place with a stove, a stack of chopped wood, a narrow bed, and enough quiet to make a man hear every memory he had tried to outrun. Behind the seat sat a folded uniform bag, a dented metal case of service papers, a small box of medication, 2 faded photographs, and Vesper's leather leash coiled as neatly as a promise. The pickup rolled past a sign half buried in snow. Blue Spruce Cafe, hot coffee, warm pie, safe rods. Alden's hands tightened briefly on the wheel. He had been driving for hours. His shoulders had begun to ache, and the coffee from the gas station 2 counties back had gone cold and bitter in the cup holder. Vesper lifted his head before Alden even touched the blinker. "You vote yes?" Alden murmured. Vesper blinked once. "That's the closest thing to enthusiasm I've seen all day." The dog exhaled through his nose, long and unimpressed. Alden almost smiled. The Blue Spruce Cafe sat beside the highway like a warm thought in the snow. Its roof was painted deep green, its windows glowed amber, and 2 small spruce trees stood in barrels beside the entrance. The parking lot had been plowed into uneven ridges. A red pickup, 2 sedans, and a delivery van sat steaming in the cold. When Alden stepped out, the wind came sharp against his face. Vesper jumped down after him, landing lightly despite his size. The German Shepherd's service vest was dark brown canvas, simple and worn, with a patch that read Surface Dog, Do Not Distract. Alden checked the leash, not because Vesper needed it, but because rituals kept the world orderly. Inside, the cafe smelled of coffee, bacon, maple syrup, warm bread, and old wood. The sound of silverware and quiet conversation wrapped around Alden like something almost gentle. Sunlight fell through the windows and made every coffee cup glow. A bell above the door gave a small, bright ring. Several people looked up. Alden was used to that pause. A large man in a faded military jacket and road-worn boots drew notice. A large German shepherd drew more. Together, they made people decide things before either of them spoke. Behind the counter stood Paula Larkin, the manager of the cafe. At 52, Paula had the sturdy build of a woman who had carried trays, payroll worries, and winter bills for too many years to be easily surprised. Her round face was flushed from kitchen heat, her brown eyes sharp with responsibility, and chestnut hair was tied high behind her head, with loose strands escaping around her temples. She wore a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled, black pants, non-slip shoes, and a spruce green apron with Blue Spruce Cafe stitched across the front. A silver name tag read Paula. A blue pen rested behind her right ear, and she touched it whenever life threatened to become inconvenient. Her eyes moved from Alden to Vesper. Alden stopped just inside the door. "Service dog," he said quietly. Paula hesitated only a second, then nodded. "All right, back corner table is open." There was caution in her voice, but not cruelty. A young waitress approached with menus in hand. Molly Brandt was 23, small and quick, with strawberry blonde hair tied in a high ponytail and soft green eyes that seemed to apologize before her mouth did. Freckles crossed the bridge of her nose, and her pale blue waitress uniform looked slightly too big at the shoulders. Her name tag sat crooked. She noticed it, fixed it, then smiled at Vesper with the kind of warmth that belonged to people who trusted animals before they trusted most headlines. "I can bring water for him," Molly said. "Appreciate it," Alden replied. He chose the table in the far back corner, the one with a wall behind it and a clear view of the front door, kitchen entrance, register, and parking lot. He did not choose it because he expected trouble. He chose it because some habits survived when the war was over. A man could hang up a uniform, but the eyes kept their old commandments. Vesper slid beneath the table and lowered his head to his paws. A child at a nearby booth whispered, "Mom, is that dog pretending to be a statue?" Alden looked down at Vesper. "Don't let it go to your head." Vesper did not move. Molly returned with black coffee for Alden and a metal bowl of water for Vesper. Alden ordered soup, toast, and eggs because they were simple things, and simple things were easier to trust. At the counter, an elderly woman carefully searched through her purse. Marjorie Winslow, 76, was small and narrow-shouldered. With a soft stoop she tried to hide by sitting very straight. Her silver-white hair was twisted into a low bun, and her pale blue eyes carried the stubborn brightness of someone who had spent a lifetime saying, "I'm fine," even when she was not. She wore a long navy wool coat, a deep red plaid scarf, a gray knit dress, black winter shoes, and a brown leather purse held close against her ribs. A thin wedding ring shone on her right hand, and she touched it whenever worry found her. 2 booths away sat Earl Hanratty, 71, a retired truck driver with a red nose, a white stubble beard, and big oil-stained hands wrapped around a coffee mug. His flannel shirt was red and black, his quilted brown vest was worn thin at the pockets, and an old trucking company cap shaded his narrowed gray eyes. He looked like a man who trusted roads, engines, and weather reports more than strangers. Near the window, Darlene Pike ate breakfast alone. She was 67, broad and warm-faced, with chin-length silver hair and steady nurse's hands. A plum-colored winter jacket hung over the chair beside her, and a tiny silver crosspin caught the light near the collar. Darlene had been retired from nursing for 6 years, but the habit of watching people breathe had never retired with her, and near the register stood Colton Sayers. He was 38, lean in the wrong way, as if hunger and bad choices had worn him down unevenly. His narrow face held high cheekbones, restless dark eyes, and a thin smile that came and went at poorly chosen moments. His brown hair was cut badly under a black knit cap, and stubble roughened his jaw. He wore an old black parka, a gray hoodie, dark cargo pants, dirty sneakers, and a blue-black canvas bag slung across his chest. One cheap steel ring circled his pinky finger. He turned it whenever he lied, though no one in the cafe knew that yet. The morning continued gently. Coffee poured, bacon hissed. Someone laughed near the front window. Snow slid from the cafe roof in a soft, rushing sheet. Then Vesper lifted his head. It was such a small movement that no one noticed except Alden. The German shepherd's ears rose. His nostrils widened. His amber eyes fixed on the counter. Not with curiosity, but with certainty. Alden's spoon paused halfway to the bowl. Vesper heard something Alden had not. The tiny whisper of a zipper sliding open where no zipper should have moved. He smelled something shifting through the room's warm fog of coffee and syrup. A faint medicinal scent, sharp and familiar, moving away from Marjorie's purse. He saw Colton step too close, saw Marjorie's hand reach back toward a pocket that no longer held what it had held a moment before. Alden set the spoon down. Outside, sunlight flashed across the snow so brightly the world seemed innocent. But under the table, Vesper's body had gone still in a way Alden knew too well. Alden did not know what had been taken. He did not yet know whose life had just been placed inside a thief's canvas bag. But the dog beneath his table had become a prayer with teeth, silent and waiting. Vesper rose. The metal bowl beside him trembled once as his shoulder brushed the table leg. Molly looked over from the coffee station. Paula glanced up from the register. Earl lowered his newspaper. Marjorie kept searching her purse, her face slowly losing color. Colton shifted toward the front door. Vesper stepped out from beneath Alden's table and crossed the aisle with controlled, soundless purpose. He did not bark. He did not growl. He simply placed himself between Colton Sayers and the cafe door, black and gold body still as a winter monument. Alden stood slowly, his eyes on the dog, because Vesper never left his position without a reason. And whatever that reason was, it had just walked too close to the exit. Vesper stood between Colton Sayers and the front door, as if the winter itself had given him orders. The German shepherd did not bark. He did not bare his teeth. He simply planted his black and gold body across the worn rubber mat, his amber eyes fixed not on Colton's face, but on the blue-black canvas bag hanging against the man's hip. For 1 second, the Blue Spruce Cafe forgot how to breathe. Colton froze with one hand half lifted. The pose of an innocent man erupted at an inconvenient moment. He was lean, narrow-faced, and badly dressed for the cold in a black parka that had lost its shape at the cuffs. A cheap steel ring sat on his pinky finger, and now that finger began turning it in small circles. His dark eyes flicked once toward the register, once toward the door, then toward the dog. "Hey," Colton said loudly, his voice rising just enough to invite witnesses. "What's wrong with your dog?" Alden Rusk moved from his back corner table with the controlled slowness of a man who knew sudden movements could make foolish people braver than they ought to be. His faded green military jacket hung open over the brown-gray thermal shirt, and his scratch watch caught a line of sunlight when he reached for Vesper's leash. "Vesper," Alden said softly. "Stand." The dog obeyed the tone, not the tension. He remained upright, still as a carved guardian, but his body eased by half an inch. That half inch mattered to Alden. It meant Vesper was not reacting out of fear. He was working. Paula Larkin came from behind the counter, wiping her hands on her spruce green apron. At 52, Paula had the tired authority of a woman who could run a kitchen, balance payroll, handle angry tourists, and still remember which old man wanted his eggs soft. But authority felt different when a 100-pound German shepherd stood near the exit and customers began reaching for their phones. "Sir," Paula said, her voice tight, but not yet hostile, "I need you to keep that dog with you." "He is with me," Alden replied. "He is blocking a customer." Alden looked at Colton's canvas bag again. That man may have taken something. The sentence dropped into the cafe like a fork hitting tile. Colton's face changed fast, too fast. Outrage arrived before confusion, which told Alden a great deal. "Took something?" Colton threw up both hands. "Lady, I'm just trying to pay for a sandwich. This guy comes in with a wolf and starts accusing people." "He's not a wolf," a small boy whispered from a booth. His mother shushed him and pulled him closer. Molly Brant stood near the coffee station with a pot in one hand, her pale green eyes moving between Alden, Vesper, and the old woman at the counter. Molly was 23, freckled, slight, and still soft enough to believe a room full of adults would choose fairness if given enough time. That belief was already beginning to bruise. Alden kept his voice low. "Check the camera near the register. Ask your customers if anything is missing." Paula's hand went to the pin behind her ear. She pulled it free, tapped it once against her palm, then tucked it back again. The gesture was small, but it betrayed the storm behind her eyes. "Sir, I'm not accusing anyone in my cafe because your dog stared at them." Vesper didn't stare. Paula blinked. "Excuse me," he alerted. Earl Hanratty lowered his newspaper in the booth near the window. 71 years old, with a red nose, white stubble, and big hands roughened by decades of diesel engines. Earl looked over the top of his reading glasses with the suspicion of a man who had seen plenty of trouble and trusted very little of it. His wallet chain glinted at his belt, though he did not yet notice the broken clasp hanging loose. "Dog's alert to bacon too," Earl muttered. A few nervous laughs moved through the cafe. Colton grabbed onto the sound as if it were a rope. Exactly. Maybe he smelled my breakfast. Maybe he doesn't like my coat. I don't know. But I didn't do anything. Near the counter, Marjorie Winslow searched her brown leather purse with growing confusion. At 76, Marjorie was small, white-haired, and dressed with the dignity of someone who still put on a navy wool coat and red plaid scarf, even for a simple breakfast. She patted one pocket, then another, then opened the purse wider. Her thin wedding ring flashed on her right hand as her fingers trembled over tissues, receipts, peppermints, and a folded church bulletin. The red medication pouch was not there. Not yet understanding, Marjorie smiled weakly at no one in particular. It was the kind of smile elderly people sometimes wore when they hoped embarrassment would pass before anyone noticed. Darlene Pike noticed. Darlene was 67, broad-shouldered and warm-faced, with chin-length silver hair and the steady eyes of a retired nurse who had spent too many years reading bad news in the color of a patient's lips. Sitting alone by the window, she had been spreading butter on toast. Now the knife hovered in her hand. "Mom," Darlene called gently, "are you looking for something important?" Marjorie looked up startled. "Oh no, I'm all right, I just..." She looked down again. "I had a little red pouch." Vesper's ears moved. Alden saw it. The dog did not look at Marjorie. He looked at Colton's bag, and for the first time, Alden felt the situation tilt from suspicion into something colder. Colton shifted his weight toward the door. Vesper shifted with him. Not forward, not aggressive, just enough. A silent correction. Paula saw the movement and stiffened. "That's enough, sir. I need the dog back at your table." "He's a service dog," Alden said, "and I respected that when you came in." Paula's voice hardened, though fear sat under it like ice beneath snow. "But service dog or not, he can't intimidate customers. He isn't intimidating customers. He is keeping that man from leaving with something that doesn't belong to him." Colton laughed, sharp and offended. "Listen to this. Are you hearing this? He thinks he's some kind of sheriff." Alden did not answer. There was a little cruelty in Colton's smile now, a confidence born from understanding exactly where the crowd's eyes were pointed. People were staring at the large dog, the road-worn man, the old military jacket, the boots wet with melted snow. No one was staring at the canvas bag. That was how thieves survived. They did not need invisibility. They only needed someone else to look more suspicious. For a moment, Vesper lowered his head and touched his nose lightly to the air near Colton's bag. Then he drew back, sat down on the mat, and placed one paw directly over the melted track Colton's shoe had left on the floor. The gesture was so deliberate that Molly stopped breathing. It looked almost foolish, a dog placing a paw on wet tile, but Alden understood the shape of it. Vesper was marking a line, not for Colton. For him, Alden's thumb found the cracked face of his watch. Years ago, in places without cafe windows or maple syrup or children asking innocent questions, Vesper had learned to stop at invisible borders, doorways, wires, fresh footprints, the smallest change in scent. A human eye might dismiss such things. A dog built by loyalty and discipline did not. Alden looked toward Marjorie's purse, then back at Colton's bag. Whatever was missing, Vesper believed it had crossed that line. The cafe noise thinned. Even the grill seemed quieter. Paula did not see a line. She saw a room slipping out of her control. Winter was hard on roadside cafes. One bad online video could become a wound that lasted months. A headline did not need truth to travel. Dog threatens customer at Blue Spruce. Veteran causes scene. Manager does nothing. She could already imagine the comments, the gossip, the empty booths. "I'm asking you one last time," Paula said. "Take him outside." No. The word was not loud. That made it worse. Paula's face flushed. "Then I'm calling the police." Alden nodded once. "Tell them to check the camera. I'll tell them I have a disturbance." Molly stepped forward, barely. "Paula, maybe we should ask Mrs. Winslow if..." "Molly," Paula snapped. Not cruelly, but sharply enough to send the young waitress back into silence. Marjorie tried to close her purse, but her fingers fumbled. "It's silly," she murmured. "I'm sure I moved it." Darlene stood now, slow and careful. "What kind of pouch, honey?" "Red," Marjorie said. "Small, with my name on the inside." Darlene's expression changed, not dramatically, not enough for most customers to notice. But Alden saw the nurse come back into her face. "Medication?" Darlene asked. Marjorie gave a little embarrassed laugh. "Just something prescribed, for emergencies. I don't like making a fuss." Vesper's tail pressed flat against the floor. Alden felt anger move through him then. Not hot, not reckless, but deep. The kind of anger that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with helpless people, pretending they were not helpless so the world would not treat them like a burden. Colton turned his pinky ring again. Paula pulled her phone from her apron pocket and stepped toward the end of the counter. Her hand shook slightly as she dialed. Yes, this is Paula Larkin at Blue Spruce Cafe on County Road 9. I need an officer here. There's a man refusing to control his dog. Alden closed his eyes for 1 second, not in defeat, in calculation. When he opened them, Colton was watching him. The thief's mouth curved faintly. Not enough for Paula to see, but enough for Alden. Alden looked down at Vesper. The German Shepherd did not blink. Paula continued into the phone. No one is hurt. Not yet. He's accusing customers. The dog is blocking the exit. Outside, the winter sun glared off the plowed parking lot. A truck passed on the highway, its tires hissing against wet pavement. Inside, Marjorie kept searching a purse that no longer held what she needed. Earl shook his head and folded his newspaper, still unaware that the empty space at his hip would soon teach him humility. Molly watched Vesper with frightened wonder. Darlene watched Marjorie's breathing, and Colton Sayers watched the door like a man counting the steps between sin and escape. Alden did not move away. He had learned long ago that the world sometimes mistook stillness for surrender. It was not. Sometimes stillness was a wall. Sometimes it was a prayer. Sometimes it was the last mercy left before foolishness turned into harm. Minutes later, faint and distant, a siren began to rise outside the cafe. Every face turned toward the windows. Every face except Colton's. He was looking at Vesper, and when the red-blue flicker touched the glass door, Colton smiled. Not because he was afraid, because while everyone else waited for the law to arrive, he believed the law was about to look in the wrong direction. The first patrol car rolled into the Blue Spruce Cafe parking lot, with red and blue lights sliding across the snow. Inside the cafe, the color flashed over coffee cups, window glass, pale faces, and Vesper's still black and gold body near the entrance. The German Shepherd did not turn toward the lights. He kept his amber eyes on Colton Sayers, as if the siren outside belonged to another world entirely. Alden Rusk remained standing a few steps behind the dog, one hand resting loosely around the leash. His posture was calm but not careless. Nothing about him leaned forward in threat. Nothing about him shrank backward in fear. The bell above the cafe door rang sharply when Officer Brent Galloway pushed inside. Brent Galloway was 34. Tall and thick through the shoulders, with the heavy build of a man who had mistaken size for authority more than once. His face was broad, his neck red from the cold, and his dark blonde hair was cut close to the scalp in a hard, practical style. Pale blue eyes moved quickly across the room, but not carefully. He wore a dark blue local police uniform beneath a black winter duty jacket, a heavy equipment belt, black tactical boots, and leather gloves tucked beside his holster. He carried himself with the loud confidence of someone who preferred a problem to kneel before he understood it. Behind him came Deputy Lena Cross. Lena was 29, smaller than Brent, but sharper in every movement. She stood around 5'6", with a lean frame, dark brown hair tied low at the back of her neck, and serious brown eyes that did not waste themselves on first impressions. Her uniform fit neatly under a black police coat, and a body camera sat centered on her chest. She carried a small black notebook in one pocket, the kind of habit that belonged to people who believed facts should be caught before fear could bend them. Brent took 2 steps in and stopped. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Paula Larkin moved toward him so fast the pin behind her ear almost fell out. The manager's round face was flushed, her apron wrinkled where she had been gripping it, and her eyes had the strained brightness of someone watching a business, a reputation, and a dining room full of customers slip from her control. "Officer, thank goodness," Paula said. "That man came in with the dog. He says it's a service animal, but now he's accusing customers of stealing, and the dog is blocking people from leaving." Colton Sayers stepped half a pace forward, careful to keep the canvas bag at his side and his face open for sympathy. His narrow shoulders rose in a show of nervous innocence. "I was just trying to pay," Colton said. "The dog came after me. I didn't touch anybody. I don't even know this man." Vesper's ears twitched, but he did not move. Brent looked at the dog first, then at Alden. That order mattered. Alden saw the judgment form, the faded green military jacket, the wet boots, the brown-gray shirt wrinkled from driving, the beard shadow on a tired face, the road dust at the hem of his jeans. To Brent, Alden was not a man who had spent years learning how to remain calm under pressure. He was a stranger who looked inconvenient. "Sir," Brent said, making the words sound like a warning, "get that dog away from the door." Alden kept his voice even. "He's a service dog." He alerted to that man. Brent's mouth tightened. Alerted to what? Possible theft. Colton gave a humorless laugh. Possible, so now a dog is making police reports. A few customers shifted. Earl Hanratty muttered something under his breath and looked toward Vesper with suspicion. Molly Brant stood frozen near the coffee station, both hands wrapped around the coffee pot, afraid to set it down because any movement felt too loud. Alden looked at Brent. Check the camera over the register. Ask Mrs. Winslow what she's missing. Ask the people near the counter to check their wallets. Brent glanced toward Marjorie, who was still searching her purse with trembling fingers. For one brief second, Lena looked that way too, and her expression changed. She noticed what Brent did not. The woman was not annoyed. She was frightened. Darlene Pike had already risen from her booth and moved closer to Marjorie. The retired nurse's silver hair framed a face that had gone quietly alert. She did not crowd the elderly woman. She simply stood near enough to help if pride gave way to need. Brent ignored the old woman and pointed at Alden instead. You don't give directions here, I do. Alden held his gaze. Then direct someone to check the camera. The room stiffened. Brent took the words as defiance. Lena took them as urgency. Officer, Lena said softly, stepping near Brent's shoulder, it might be worth reviewing the footage before we move anyone. The dog isn't lunging. Brent did not look at her. I've got it. That was all he said, but the meaning was clear. Not now. Not in front of everyone. Colton saw it. His thin smile almost appeared, then vanished. Paula crossed her arms. I just need this handled. Customers are getting scared. I am handling it, Brent said. He moved toward Alden. Vesper turned his head slightly, just enough to track Brent's approach. The dog did not growl. He did not rise, but his stillness became harder, denser, as if the air around him had frozen. Brent noticed. Control the dog, he ordered. He is controlled, Alden said. If he moves on anyone, I'll treat him as a threat. The words were not shouted, but they struck the cafe like a match near dry paper. Alden felt the leash in his hand, felt Vesper's awareness through that thin strip of leather. He knew what people saw. A large shepherd, a tense officer, a weathered man refusing to step away. He also knew what they did not see. Marjorie's missing pouch, Colton's bag, Lena's hesitation, Paula's fear, the widening crack in a room that had been peaceful 10 minutes earlier. Alden could have forced the truth into the open with strength. He had strength enough. That was not the problem. Strength, used at the wrong second, could become a spark, a shove, a fall, a hand near a weapon, a dog deciding his handler was under attack, a child screaming, someone slipping on melted snow, an old woman collapsing while everyone watched the wrong fight. Alden inhaled slowly. Then he did something that made Lena Cross look at him differently. He loosened his grip on the leash and gave Vesper one quiet command. Easy. The German shepherd's shoulders lowered a fraction. Not because the danger had passed, but because Alden had asked him to hold the line without becoming the storm. Lena heard that tone. It was not the voice of a drunk, not the voice of a show-off, not the voice of a man hungry for attention. It was the voice of someone who had spent a lifetime placing calm between harm and the helpless. For the first time since entering the cafe, Lena looked at Alden's left wrist. She noticed the old military watch with the cracked face. She noticed how his thumb pressed against the fracture in the glass, steady and rhythmic, like a man counting himself back from a cliff no one else could see. Something in her eyes softened. But Brent had already made up his mind. Step outside, he said. I can't. You can. If I leave, he leaves. Alden's eyes did not move from Colton, and if he has what I think he has, someone in this room may pay for that mistake. Colton's face hardened. This is insane. He's threatening me now. I didn't threaten you, Alden said. You heard him, Colton told Brent. He keeps staring at me. The dog keeps staring at me. I just want to leave. Not yet, Alden said. Brent stepped closer, his jaw tight. You are not detaining anyone in this cafe. I'm not detaining him. My dog alerted. I'm asking you to investigate. I said step outside. Alden did not move. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of forks paused halfway to mouths, coffee cooling in mugs, Molly's frightened breathing, Paula's shame turning into irritation, because shame had nowhere else to go. Marjorie whispered, I know I had it, and Darlene touched her shoulder. Brent heard none of that. His world had narrowed to one man refusing a command. Turn around, Brent said. Lena's eyes flicked to him. Brent, turn around, Brent repeated, louder. Alden looked at Vesper. Vesper looked back once. There was an entire history in that glance. Dark roads, open fields, hospital corridors, nights when Alden woke shaking, and Vesper climbed onto the bed before Alden remembered where he was. Commands given without words. Trust built in places where trust was often buried with the dead. Alden gave the smallest nod. Then he turned around. Molly made a tiny sound near the counter, almost a protest, but it died before becoming language. Brent took Alden's right wrist with unnecessary force and pulled it behind his back. The motion tugged at Alden's shoulder, but Alden did not resist. The first cuff closed with a metallic snap. Vesper rose, not fast, not toward Brent, just up. Every person in the cafe felt the room shrink. Vesper, Alden said, his voice firm. The dog stopped. Brent grabbed Alden's left wrist. Keep him still. He is still. The second cuff clicked shut. Cold steel bit into Alden's skin. He felt the edge of the metal press against bone. It was not the pain that bothered him. Pain had been an old teacher. What bothered him was Colton's reflection in the cafe window. The thief was smiling, not openly. Not enough for everyone. Enough for Alden. Earl Hanratty shook his head from his booth. Should've just listened, he muttered, but there was less certainty in his voice than before. Darlene looked from Alden's cuffed hands to Marjorie's pale face, and then toward the canvas bag near Colton's hip. Her nurse's instincts and common sense were beginning to walk in the same direction. Lena moved closer to Brent and lowered her voice. We should at least secure the other customer until we verify. Brent shot her a hard look. I'm not holding a man because a dog looked at him. It isn't just the dog. Enough, the word landed hard. Lena stepped back, but her jaw tightened. She did not argue again, not yet. Her body camera kept recording, and her eyes kept gathering what Brent refused to see. Brent turned Alden toward the counter. You're being detained for causing a disturbance and refusing a lawful order. Alden said nothing. That silence infuriated Brent more than shouting would have. Some men needed resistance to justify their anger. Alden gave him none. Colton bent slowly, pretending to adjust his shoe, and nudged the canvas bag closer to his foot. Vesper's gaze dropped to the movement. Alden saw it. Even in cuffs, he saw it. The problem was no longer convincing Brent. The problem was time. Marjorie's breathing had become shallow. Darlene guided her gently into a chair. Molly finally set down the coffee pot and hurried toward them, her young face pale. Mrs. Winslow, Molly asked, do you want me to call someone? I don't want trouble, Marjorie whispered. Darlene's voice was kind but firm. Honey, trouble is already here. We're just trying to name it correctly. Alden felt those words settle somewhere deep in him. Trying to name trouble correctly. That was the whole room's failure. They had named the dog trouble. They had named the quiet man trouble. They had named the thief a customer. They had named fear as order and order as safety. Alden closed his eyes for half a heartbeat. When he opened them, he no longer looked at Brent. He looked only at Vesper. The dog stood beside the door, tense but waiting, caught between instinct and obedience. His handler was restrained. The man with the bag was still free. The elderly woman was growing weaker. The room was full of noise and wrong conclusions. Alden could not use his hands. He still had his breath. He let out a short whistle, high and clean, no louder than a bird calling from a winter branch. Vesper's ears snapped forward. Alden shifted 2 fingers behind his back, inside the tight circle of the cuffs. The gesture was almost invisible, hidden by his jacket and the angle of his body. But Vesper saw. The German shepherd changed immediately. His focus left Brent. His body turned away from Alden. He walked with silent precision to the front door, lowered his haunches beside the rubber mat, and sat facing the room, not blocking the exit fully, not threatening anyone, but positioned exactly where no one could slip past unnoticed. His tail lay flat. His chest lifted once. Then he became still, a soldier beside a winter door. Alden stood cuffed near the counter, wrist burning, face calm. Colton stopped smiling. Outside, the patrol lights continued to flash across the glass, painting the snow red and blue as if the whole world were trying to warn them. But inside the cafe, the only one who had chosen the right post was the dog. Vesper sat beside the front door of the Blue Spruce Cafe as if the whole room had become his post. The German shepherd did not block the exit completely. Anyone could still walk around him if they moved slowly and honestly, but no one could leave without passing through the reach of his amber eyes. His black and gold body remained upright on the rubber mat, tail flat behind him, ears lifted, chest still. The winter light outside touched the glass door behind him and made the golden streak on his forehead glow faintly, like a candle wick refusing to go out. Officer Brent Galloway gave a short laugh. Well, Brent said, tightening his grip on Alden's arm. Looks like the dog finally learned where to sit. Alden Rusk stood near the counter with his hands cuffed behind his back. The metal rings had begun to bite into his wrists, but his face did not change. He watched Vesper, not Brent. A man who had survived worse rooms than this one knew that panic was a luxury innocent people could not afford. Deputy Lena Cross noticed the difference. Vesper was not sulking. He was not confused. He was not waiting to be comforted by his handler. He was sitting exactly where he had chosen to sit, measuring the room with a kind of patient intelligence that made Lena's training feel suddenly too small. He isn't acting aggressive, Lena said quietly. Brent barely looked at her. He's a dog. He's a trained dog. He's still a dog. Alden's voice came low from beside the counter. That's why he's seeing what you're missing. Brent turned sharply. You don't get to talk right now. Across the cafe, Marjorie Winslow sat in a chair Darlene Pike had pulled from a nearby table. The elderly woman's navy coat hung open now, her red scarf loose around her throat. Her hands moved over her purse again and again, searching the same places with the fragile hope that panic had simply hidden the truth from her. "It was right here," Marjorie whispered. "I always keep it right here." Darlene knelt beside her with the calm gravity of a nurse who had walked through fear many times and learned not to add her own. Her silver hair framed her warm face, but her eyes had gone sharp and practical. "Marjorie, honey, do you wear a medical bracelet?" Marjorie blinked, embarrassed even in distress. "It's nothing. I don't want to make a fuss." Darlene's voice softened. "You can make a fuss with me. I've survived night shifts, hospital coffee, and doctors with handwriting like bird tracks. A little fuss won't frighten me." The joke was small, but it steadied Marjorie enough to lift her sleeve. A thin medical bracelet gleamed on her wrist. Molly Brandt, pale and wide-eyed, hovered nearby with both hands pressed against her apron. The young waitress looked from Marjorie to Paula, then to the phone on the counter. She wanted permission to do the right thing. That was the sad part. Some young hearts had already learned that kindness often had to ask management first. Darlene read the bracelet and her expression tightened. "Molly," she said, no longer asking, "call 911. Tell them we have an elderly woman missing prescribed emergency medication and showing shortness of breath." Paula Larkin's face drained. 911, Paula repeated. "Is that necessary?" Darlene looked up at her. Yes. That one word changed something in the cafe. Until then, Paula had been afraid of a scene. A bad review, a dog at the door, a man refusing to leave. But now an old woman sat trembling in one of Paula's chairs, and the trouble had a pulse. It breathed shallowly. It wore a wedding ring on the wrong hand, because age had thinned the finger it once belonged on. Molly grabbed the phone. Colton Sayers shifted near the register. It was a small movement, just one foot sliding back, one shoulder turning toward the door. But Vesper's head moved with it. The dog's gaze fastened to him again, silent as a locked gate. Lena saw it. So did Alden. Colton noticed both of them noticing, and the thin skin around his eyes tightened. He was still trying to look offended, still trying to wear the face of a wrong customer, but sweat had begun to shine along his hairline despite the cold outside. "I'm leaving," Colton said suddenly. "This is crazy. I don't need to stand here while some old guy and his dog accuse me of whatever this is." Brent pointed at him without turning away from Alden. "Sir, just stay put for a minute." "For what?" Colton snapped. Then, catching himself, he lowered his voice. "I mean, officer, I didn't do anything." Alden said nothing. Vesper's ears angled forward. Earl Hanratty pushed himself halfway out of his booth. The old trucker's face was confused now, his earlier certainty loosening like an old knot. He patted the back pocket of his jeans once, then again. His wallet chain hung at his belt, but the end of it dangled free, broken clasp swinging. Earl looked down. For the first time that morning, his suspicion turned inward. "My wallet," he murmured. No one heard him except Molly, and Molly was speaking into the phone. Paula heard only the word wallet and turned sharply. "What?" Earl's weathered face darkened. "My wallet's gone." The room seemed to tilt. Colton took a step toward the door. Vesper stood, not with a snarl, not with fury, with duty. Colton held up both hands again. "I'm not staying here to be blamed for every missing thing in the building." Lena moved half a step, her hand not on her weapon but lifted slightly in warning. "Sir, don't leave yet." Colton's eyes darted to her, then to Brent, then to Alden. He could feel the attention shifting. The magic of misdirection was breaking. The wolf did not fear the sheepdog because of teeth alone. The wolf feared the moment the flock finally looked the right way. Marjorie coughed softly. Darlene placed one hand against Marjorie's back. "Breathe slow for me." Molly's voice shook into the phone. "Yes, Blue Spruce Cafe, County Road 9. Please hurry." Colton reached for the door handle. The little bell above the door trembled before the door even opened. Vesper moved. He crossed the distance in a clean, controlled burst, too fast for Colton and too precise for panic. His jaws did not close on flesh. They closed on the strap of the blue-black canvas bag. Colton yanked backward. "Get off." Vesper planted his paws and pulled once. The bag tore from Colton's shoulder and hit the floor with a heavy slap. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the zipper split open. Truth spilled across the cafe floor. A brown leather wallet slid under a chair. A set of car keys skidded against the counter. A folded envelope of cash fluttered open. A woman's old flip phone bounced once and landed near Molly's shoe. Small silver wedding ring rolled in a bright circle before falling flat. 2 IDs, a gas card, loose bills, and finally a red medication pouch tumbled onto the black rubber mat beside Vesper's paws. Marjorie saw it. Her hand went to her mouth. "My pouch," she whispered. Darlene moved before anyone else did. She crossed the floor with surprising speed for a woman of 67, scooped up the red pouch, and checked the name inside. Marjorie Winslow, she said. This is hers. Colton backed away, face pale now. That's not mine. I found that. I was going to turn it in. Earl stood fully, one huge hand pointing at the wallet under the chair. That's mine. A middle-aged woman near the window, June Carver, 46, a tourist with curly auburn hair, a bright purple winter coat, and the startled honesty of someone unused to being part of trouble, bent down and snatched up the flip phone. That's my mother's phone, June said, voice rising. It was in my coat pocket. Paula looked at the scattered items, then at Alden's cuffed hands. The shame hit her before the words did. Brent stared at the floor. For the first time since entering the cafe, his certainty had nowhere to stand. Darlene returned to Marjorie, opened the pouch only enough to verify the labeled contents, and helped the elderly woman according to the prescription instructions, while Molly stayed on the phone with emergency services. No one crowded them now. Even fear had learned to make space. Colton bolted. He did not go for the front door. Vesper stood there with the fallen bag at his paws. Colton spun toward the kitchen entrance, knocking into a chair hard enough to send it scraping across the floor. Stop, Lena shouted. Colton ran. Vesper looked once at Alden. Alden's voice cut through the cafe, calm and absolute. Vesper, hold. The German Shepherd launched after Colton, but there was no wildness in him. He caught the loose sleeve of Colton's parka near the elbow and the dangling strap of the man's backpack in one controlled grip. Colton slipped on the wet track of melted snow near the kitchen threshold and went down on one knee, then onto his side with a grunt. Vesper released the sleeve before skin could tear. Then he stood over the path forward, blocking Colton from rising, one sharp bark bursting from his chest like a judge's gavel. Colton froze, not because he had been mauled, because he understood the dog could have done far worse and had chosen not to. Alden stood cuffed by the counter. The cafe around him was full of scattered stolen lives. Keys, cash, medicine, old phones, a wedding ring. Small objects, yes, but each one belonged to a human being who had carried a story into that room. Brent looked from the red pouch in Darlene's hand to Marjorie's pale face, then to Alden's wrists locked behind his back. The officer's jaw slackened. The truth, which had been waiting patiently by the door, had finally entered the room, and Brent Galloway realized the man in handcuffs had never been the danger. The danger had been smiling right beside him. The Blue Spruce Cafe did not erupt into applause. Truth rarely arrived that way. It came instead in the scrape of a chair leg, the click of a dropped key settling against tile, the thin breath of an old woman trying not to panic, and the terrible quiet of people realizing they had been watching the wrong man. The stolen things lay scattered across the floor between the counter and the front door. Earl Hanratty's brown wallet sat open under a chair. June Carver's old flip phone rested near Molly's black sneaker. A small wedding ring glimmered beside a napkin dispenser. Loose bills, gas cards, IDs, a folded envelope. And Marjorie Winslow's red medication pouch had spilled from Colton Sayers' canvas bag, like a confession no mouth could take back. Colton himself was on the floor near the kitchen entrance, breathing hard, one cheek flushed from embarrassment more than injury. Vesper stood several feet away now, not touching him, not threatening him, simply blocking the path forward. The German Shepherd's ears remained lifted, but his jaw was relaxed. His work had been clean. No blood, no torn skin, no cruelty. Only truth stopped at the door. Vesper, Alden said from beside the counter. The dog turned his head. Back. Vesper stepped away from Colton and returned to Alden's side with the quiet obedience of a soldier leaving a completed post. He sat beside the man in handcuffs, black and gold body steady, amber eyes still watchful. Officer Brent Galloway stood frozen. The big local officer, who had entered the cafe with command in his voice and certainty in his shoulders, now looked strangely young. His pale blue eyes moved from the scattered stolen items to Marjorie's shaking hands, then to Alden's wrists locked behind his back. His mouth opened once, but no order came out. Deputy Lena Cross moved first. Officer Galloway, Lena said, her voice controlled but sharper than before. Unlock him. Brent looked at her as if he had forgotten she was there. Now, Lena added. The word was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried the authority Brent had failed to earn. Brent fumbled for his handcuff key. His thick fingers, so confident minutes before, shook against the ring on his belt. The key slipped once and hit the tile with a tiny metallic sound that made the whole cafe wince. Alden did not look down at it. That was worse. A yelling man would have given Brent something to push against. Alden's silence left him alone with what he had done. Lena picked up the key and handed it to him. Brent took it without meeting her eyes. He stepped behind Alden and opened the cuffs. The steel released with two small clicks. Red marks circled Alden's wrists. Molly Brant saw them and covered her mouth. The young waitress had tears in her eyes, though she seemed angry with herself for having them. She had watched the wrong person suffer in her workplace, and youth had offered her no script for how to fix that. Alden rubbed one wrist only once. Then he crouched beside Vesper and placed his hand on the dog's head. "Good hold," he murmured. Vesper leaned into his palm, just a little, not enough to seem needy, enough to prove he was alive, loyal and tired in the secret way working dogs sometimes were after choosing restraint over instinct. Across the room, Darlene Pike had Marjorie seated and breathing more steadily. Darlene's plum winter jacket had been thrown over the back of a chair, and her cream turtleneck was wrinkled at the sleeves from moving quickly. Her face remained calm, but her eyes were wet. Nurses learned composure, but not immunity. Marjorie clutched the red pouch in both hands, as if it were a candle brought back from a storm. "If it had been gone much longer," she whispered, "I don't know what would happen." "You don't have to think about that right now," Darlene said gently. "You're here, you're breathing. That's enough for this minute." Molly stood nearby with the cafe phone still in hand. "The ambulance is coming," she said. "They said to keep her seated and calm." Marjorie gave a fragile smile. "I have never been very good at calm." Darlene patted her hand. "That makes two of us. I just learned to fake it professionally." A faint, broken laugh moved through the nearest tables. It did not erase the fear, but it gave it somewhere softer to land. Paula Larkin stood behind the counter, both hands gripping the edge of it. Her face had gone pale beneath the kitchen flush. The blue pin behind her ear had fallen at some point and lay near the register. For the first time since Alden entered, Paula did not look like a manager protecting a cafe. She looked like a woman staring at the wreckage of her own quick judgment. Paula began. The word collapsed. Lena was already moving toward the register. She looked up at the camera mounted near the corner above the pie display. "Paula," she said, "I need access to the security footage." Paula blinked, then nodded too quickly. Yes, of course." Lena went behind the counter with permission, pulled a small monitor toward her, and began rewinding the footage. Her dark eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with purpose. This was the Lena who had been trying to exist inside the morning from the beginning, the one who gathered facts while louder people gathered certainty. On the screen, the cafe rewound itself into guilt. Colton brushing past Earl's booth. Colton pausing too close behind June's chair. Colton standing near Marjorie while her purse rested open on the counter. Colton's hand dipping, swift and practiced. Alden and Vesper still seated in the back corner at that moment. Lena watched once. Then again, her jaw tightened. "Brent," she said. Brent came closer, but slowly, as if each step cost him something. Lena turned the monitor toward him. There was no argument left. Colton, still near the kitchen entrance, laughed once under his breath. It was an ugly little sound, stripped of confidence. "You people act like I killed somebody," he said. The room changed, not loudly, deeply. Marjorie looked at him from her chair. She was tiny in that moment, white-haired and pale, a woman who had spent her life trying not to inconvenience anyone. But her eyes were clear. "You almost made me disappear over a pouch you didn't even need," she said. No one spoke. Even Colton looked away. Vesper lowered his head, sniffed once near Colton's dropped parka, then nudged something small across the floor with his nose. It slid to a stop near Alden's boot, a photograph, old, creased, and softened at the corners. A boy of about 8 stood in the picture, missing one front tooth, wearing a baseball cap too large for him. Behind the boy, younger Colton held him on his shoulders and smiled like a man who still believed he had time to become someone else. Beside the photo lay a small bronze recovery coin. The cafe seemed to hold its breath again, but differently this time. Alden looked at Colton. For one heartbeat, the thief was not a thief. He was a ruined father, a failed promise, a man who had carried a child's photograph while stealing from grandmothers and strangers. Then the heartbeat passed. Compassion did not erase consequence. Alden picked up the photo and coin. He walked to Colton and set them on the table nearest him. Not in his hand, not gently enough to forgive, but not cruelly enough to deny he was human. "Being broken does not give you the right to break someone weaker," Alden said. Colton's face tightened. Alden's voice remained steady. "Poor is not the same as empty. Desperate is not the same as innocent. You took her medicine. You did not steal money today. You stole time." Colton stared at the floor. For once, he had no performance ready. Earl Hanratty shuffled forward with his wallet in hand. The old trucker's cap sat low over his eyes, and shame had made his broad shoulders cave inward. He stopped in front of Alden. "I owe you something," Earl said. Alden waited. Earl swallowed. I looked at your coat before I looked at your eyes. That was my mistake. Alden studied him, then nodded once. Most people do, sooner or later. Earl gave a tired, humorless chuckle. Yeah, well, some of us are old enough to know better and still dumb enough to need reminding. Paula finally came around the counter. Her apron was twisted, her hands trembling. Mr. Rusk, she said, voice breaking on the name she had only just learned from Lena's check of his ID. I am sorry. I thought I was protecting my cafe. Alden looked around the room. The customers shaken, the stolen things recovered. Marjorie breathing in a chair, Vesper sitting calmly at his leg. You were protecting the quiet, he said, not the cafe. Paula flinched, but she did not deny it. A cafe is more than tables and coffee, Alden continued. If you keep the stove warm but push the truth out the door, it still gets cold in here. Paula's eyes filled. She nodded. Outside, another vehicle pulled into the lot. Not the ambulance yet. A dark police SUV stopped beside Brent's cruiser. Captain Lorna Vale entered with no hurry and no wasted movement. She was 58, tall for a woman, with a straight back, a square jaw, and steel gray hair cut neatly to her chin. Her eyes were cool gray, not unkind, but exacting. She wore a black winter police coat over a crisp uniform, dark gloves, and a captain's badge that did not need shine to command the room. Lorna looked like the kind of woman who had learned long ago that raising her voice usually meant someone had already stopped listening. Lena met her near the counter and gave a concise report. She showed the footage. She pointed out Alden's wrist marks, Marjorie's recovered medication pouch, the items on the floor, and Colton seated under supervision near the kitchen. Captain Vale listened without interrupting. Then she turned to Brent. Officer Galloway, she said, your weapon and badge. Temporarily. Pending review. Brent's face went red, then pale. Captain, I had a disturbance call. The situation was unclear. Unclear situations are when observation matters most. Mom, he refused a lawful order. Captain Vale's eyes moved once to Alden's wrists. And you stopped investigating the moment your pride felt challenged. Brent looked down. A badge, Lorna said, voice cold enough to quiet even the kitchen vents, does not give a man permission to stop seeing. Brent slowly removed his badge, then his duty belt. Lena accepted both with a face that showed no triumph. Brent turned toward Alden. His apology came rough, not polished. I was wrong. Alden held his gaze. Yes, I'm sorry. Alden did not rush to comfort him. Mercy, like discipline, did not need to pretend harm was harmless. Next time, Alden said, for you decide who the danger is. Watch who is trying to leave the truth behind. The ambulance arrived minutes later, lights soft against the snow. 2 EMTs entered with a medical bag and calm voices. One of them, a lean man in his 40s named Travis Belmore, had close-cropped black hair, tired brown eyes, and the gentle efficiency of someone used to entering rooms after fear had made a mess of them. His partner, Nina Alvarez, a sturdy woman with dark hair braided down her back and warm copper skin, spoke to Marjorie as if she were both patient and person. Not a problem to be solved. They checked Marjorie carefully. The cafe waited. At last, Nina looked up. She's stable. We'll take her in to be safe, but she's out of immediate danger. The breath that left the room seemed to lift the roof a little. Marjorie reached toward Vesper. Alden guided the dog closer. The German shepherd lowered his head, and the old woman touched the pale patch beneath his chin. No crown, Marjorie whispered. No trumpet. Just a leash and good eyes. Vesper blinked slowly. Alden stood beside him, wrists red, jacket worn, face unreadable, except for the softness that passed through his eyes. The floor still held scattered proof of human weakness, but beside Alden sat a quiet guardian of ordinary grace, asking for nothing, claiming nothing, needing no praise, only a place at his handler's side. And the truth, finally, had room to breathe. After Colton Sayers was led out of the Blue Spruce Cafe, no one knew what to do with their hands. Some people held coffee mugs that had gone cold. Some touched pockets where stolen things had been returned, as if checking whether ordinary life had truly come back. Earl Hanratty kept opening and closing his brown wallet, not to count the money inside, but to convince himself the old leather thing was still his. June Carver sat near the window with her recovered phone pressed against her chest, blinking too fast. The cafe did not feel like a restaurant for a while. It felt like a small chapel after a storm had passed through the roof. The plates on the tables had cooled. The bacon had gone stiff. Syrup sat in golden puddles beside abandoned pancakes. The pie display still glowed beneath the counter lights, but no one seemed hungry enough to look at it. Outside, the snow remained bright and harmless, as if the world beyond the glass had no idea what had nearly happened inside. Captain Lorna Vale finished speaking with Deputy Lena Cross near the front entrance. Officer Brent Galloway sat outside in his cruiser, without his badge or duty belt, waiting for another unit to take him back to the station. No one cheered that. Even Earl, who had opinions about nearly everything, only looked through the window and shook his head. Alden Russ stood near the back of the cafe with Vesper at his side. The red marks around Alden's wrists had deepened. He had pulled his sleeves down over them, but Molly Brandt had seen enough. The young waitress moved around the counter with a fresh bowl of chicken soup, a plate of toast, and a mug of black coffee. Her hand shook slightly, causing the coffee to ripple. "I'm sorry," Molly said when she reached his table. "Your first bowl got cold." Alden looked at the soup, then at her pale face and freckled nose. Soup does that when everybody stops eating. Molly tried to smile. It almost worked. "I should have said something sooner," she whispered. Alden sat down slowly. Not because he was weak, but because the room had finally stopped needing him upright. Vesper settled beside his chair, close enough that one shoulder brushed Alden's boot. "You said enough when it mattered," Alden replied. Molly shook her head. "I saw she was scared, Mrs. Winslow. I saw you weren't acting like a dangerous man. I waited for someone else to say it first." Alden wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. The heat found the sore places in his wrists. "That's how most bad things get a head start," he said. "They don't need everyone to help. They just need enough good people to wait." Molly lowered her eyes, but the words did not wound her cruelly. They gave shape to what she already felt. Sometimes truth hurt less when someone finally named it. Across the room, Paula Larkin turned the lock on the cafe door and flipped the sign to closed. Then she added a handwritten note beneath it. "Back soon. Please drive safe." She did not ask the remaining customers to leave. "If you need to sit," Paula said, voice rough. "Sit. Coffee's on me." Earl lifted his cup. "Coffee was already on you, Paula. I hadn't paid yet." A weak laugh moved through the room. Paula pointed at him. "Then your coffee is especially on me." The laugh grew a little stronger. Not much. Enough to prove the room was not dead. Darlene Pike remained beside Marjorie Winslow, watching the older woman's breathing with the calm stubbornness of a retired nurse who refused to retire from caring. The EMTs had advised Marjorie to be checked further, and an ambulance waited outside. But Marjorie had asked for a few minutes. She wanted to steady herself before being carried out of a place where she had spent 30 years ordering the same kind of tea. Marjorie sat wrapped in her navy coat, the red scarf folded neatly in her lap. The recovered medication pouch rested between her hands. Her white hair had loosened from its bun, and the stray wisps around her face made her look both older and strangely younger, like a girl caught pretending not to be afraid. "I used to come here with my husband," she said to Alden when he approached. "Every other Thursday. He said the coffee tasted like it had been boiled in a boot, but he drank 3 cups every time." Paula wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. "Walter always complained and always tipped 20%. He liked pretending he was difficult," Marjorie said. "It gave him a hobby after retirement." Earl grunted. "A man needs hobbies." Darlene gave him a look. "Try knitting." Earl made a face. "I'd rather be robbed again." This time, the laughter was real enough to warm the windows. Alden stood near Marjorie's chair. Vesper sat beside him, quiet, his honey-gold chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. Marjorie looked at the dog for a long moment. "He knew," she said. Alden nodded. "He knew enough. I didn't even know enough." Her mouth trembled. "I thought I had just misplaced it. I always do that now. Glasses, keys, receipts. I thought maybe this was another old woman thing." Darlene's hand came down over hers. "It was not an old woman thing. It was a thief thing." Marjorie smiled faintly. "That is oddly comforting." Then her smile faded. "After Walter died, my daughter wanted me to move closer," she said. "I told her no. I told her I could manage. I drive myself to town. I buy my own medicine, pay my own bills, carry my own bags." She looked down at the red pouch. "I suppose I have been trying to prove I am not fading." Alden did not answer quickly. The truth was too familiar. He had returned from service with a cabin waiting, a stove waiting, a bed waiting, and not a single person he was willing to call at 2 in the morning. People praised independence as if it were always strength. But sometimes independence was only loneliness wearing polished shoes. Darlene seemed to hear the thought before Alden spoke it. "Letting someone help you is not the same as surrendering," she said. Marjorie looked at her. "You sound like a nurse. I was one for 42 years. Also a mother. Same job, worse hours." Marjorie laughed softly, then turned to Alden. "Do you believe that?" Alden glanced down at Vesper. The dog had lowered his head and was looking at Alden's sleeve. A second later, Vesper leaned forward and touched his nose gently against the fabric covering Alden's wrist. Alden went still. Vesper did it again, softer this time. The German shepherd had ignored steak, strangers, spilled food, sirens, and praise. But he had not ignored the bruise hidden under Alden's cuff. For the first time that morning, Alden looked away. The room seemed to quiet around that tiny gesture. No one said anything. No one needed to. A service dog trained for war and worry had found the wound his handler was trying to hide, and the sight of it was somehow more intimate than any confession. Marjorie's eyes filled. "Oh," she whispered. "So he takes care of you too." Alden swallowed once. "Every day. And do you let him?" The question should have been simple. It was not. Alden looked at Vesper's amber eyes, the small nick in the left ear, the golden streak down the forehead, the patient face that had followed him through more darkness than any person in the cafe could imagine. "I'm learning," Alden said. Darlene nodded, as if that answer was a vital sign returning. Paula came over, carrying a paper bag and a small foil container. Her face was still red from crying, though she had regained enough composure to look like a manager again. "I packed steak," she said, looking at Alden. "For him later, since I've been informed that soldiers on duty don't accept bribes." Vesper's ears flicked at the word steak. Alden looked down. "Traitor." The dog did not move, but his eyes shifted toward the foil container. Earl pointed. "That dog understands English better than my brother-in-law." "Most dogs do," Darlene said. Paula gave Alden the bag. "I also wanted to say something without making excuses." Alden waited. "I was afraid of losing control of my cafe," she said. "And because of that, I nearly stopped listening to the one person in here who was trying to protect it." Alden looked around the room. The pie display, the old booths, the counter stools, the people holding returned pieces of their lives. "You protected the quiet," he said, gentler than before. "Quiet and safety aren't always the same thing." Paula nodded. "I know that now." She looked toward the front window. "I'm going to put up a sign, Service Animals Welcome. Kindness Required." Earl raised his coffee. "Make the letters big. Half the town can't read without glasses." Molly, still near the counter, said, "Maybe add ask before you judge." Paula looked at Alden. "That one yours?" Alden shrugged. "Truth belongs to whoever needs it." Paula let out a wet little laugh. "It's too long for the door. Put it under the pie menu," Earl said. "Nobody reads that either. They just point." This time, even Marjorie laughed. It turned into a cough, but Darlene was there immediately, hand on her shoulder, steady as a post in snow. Lena Cross returned from speaking with Captain Vale outside. Her face was drawn but clear. She stopped beside Alden. "Colton is being transported," she said. "The footage is secured. Officer Galloway is suspended pending review." Alden nodded. Lena looked down at her notebook, then closed it. "I owe you an apology. You didn't cuff me." "No," she said. "But I saw the wrong shape of things before I said so out loud." Alden studied her. "You said it before the room did." "Not soon enough." He glanced toward Molly, then Marjorie, then Vesper. "Soon enough is a burden people carry for years. Don't make a home out of it. Just learn faster next time." Lena absorbed that like someone receiving both mercy and an order. "Yes, sir," she said. Alden almost corrected her. He was not in uniform. He was not her commander. But something in her face told him she was not saluting rank. She was acknowledging the lesson. The ambulance crew finally came to take Marjorie outside for further evaluation. Before standing, Marjorie reached for Vesper. Alden gave a soft permission. The German shepherd stepped close and lowered his great head. Marjorie touched the fur between his ears, her wrinkled fingers trembling over the golden streak on his forehead. "He has my Walter's eyes," she said. Alden raised an eyebrow. "Your husband had amber eyes and a snout?" "No," Marjorie said, smiling through tears. "He had that same look when he knew I was lying about being fine." Alden looked down at Vesper. The dog looked back at him with calm, merciless devotion. "He looks at me that way every morning," Alden said. For a beat, the cafe was silent. Then Alden Rusk laughed, not loudly, not freely enough to erase every shadow, but truly. And in the Blue Spruce Cafe, where breakfast had grown cold and truth had finally warmed the room, that small laugh felt like the first honest meal anyone had been served all day. By late afternoon, the snow outside the Blue Spruce Cafe had changed. It was still falling, but no longer with the hard brightness of morning. The flakes came down slowly now, wide and soft, drifting through the amber light as if heaven had decided to lower its voice. The parking lot glowed beneath a thin crust of ice. Tire tracks cut dark lines through the white, leading away toward the highway, toward town, toward homes where people would later tell the story and still fail to make it sound believable. Inside, the cafe had become quieter than a business should be. Paula Larkin had not reopened yet. The sign still said closed, but the lights remained on. The coffee was fresh again. The pie case still hummed. A few customers stayed by choice, speaking in low voices, returning napkins to tables, helping Molly Brandt gather the plates that had gone cold during the chaos. Alden Rusk stood near the front window with Vesper beside him. He had eaten half the soup Molly brought him, mostly because the girl kept looking over to make sure he did. His wrists still stung, but the marks had faded from angry red to dull rose. He did not hide them now. Some wounds became smaller when the room stopped pretending they were not there. Vesper sat with his shoulder touching Alden's leg, his black and gold coat catching the warm cafe light. The little nick in his left ear made him look battle-worn and oddly humble, like a knight who had misplaced his armor and kept only his manners. Alden wanted to leave before anyone called him a hero again. Hero was a word people used when they did not have to carry the memories afterward. He only wanted his cabin, his stove, and enough quiet to sleep. Maybe, if Mercy felt generous, he would sleep without waking at 2 in the morning, with his hand reaching for a rifle that was no longer there. Paula approached with a brown paper bag folded at the top. At 52, she looked older than she had that morning, but not weaker. Her apron had been changed, her hair had been fixed, the pin was back behind her ear, though now it looked less like a weapon against disorder and more like a tool for repair. "I packed soup," she said. "Bread too, coffee grounds, and the steak." At the word steak, Vesper's ears moved. Alden looked down. "You heard nothing." Vesper stared forward with saintly dishonesty. Paula's mouth trembled into a smile. "It's wrapped separately, for after duty. He'll file a complaint if it's overcooked. I figured he had standards. He has opinions. Standards are still under review." Paula let out a soft laugh, then swallowed it before it could become tears. "I need you to know," she said, "this isn't just an apology bag." Alden looked at her. "It's a promise," Paula continued. "This place will learn to listen better. I will learn to listen better. I was so afraid of trouble walking in that I almost threw out the truth with it." Alden took the bag carefully. "Fear does that," he said. "It dresses itself up as responsibility." Paula nodded. "And responsibility without humility can get cruel." That answer surprised him a little, not because it was pretty, because it sounded earned. The front door opened, and a woman stepped in from the snow. She was in her late 40s, tall and slender, with auburn hair cut just below her jaw and threaded with a few early silver strands. Her skin was fair, pink by cold, and her green eyes carried the fierce exhaustion of a daughter who had spent years loving a stubborn mother from a distance that neither woman knew how to close. She wore a charcoal wool coat, dark jeans, winter boots dusted white at the toes, and a knitted teal scarf wrapped twice around her neck. Her name was Claire Winslow, Marjorie's only daughter. Claire looked first at the ambulance outside, then at the cafe, then at Marjorie sitting near the counter beneath Darlene Pike's watchful care. "Mom," Claire breathed. Marjorie's face changed in a way Alden had not seen all day. The proud, careful mask loosened. For a second, she looked not like a widow, not like an elderly woman determined to manage, but like someone's mother caught being fragile. "I told them not to scare you," Marjorie said. Claire crossed the room quickly and knelt in front of her. "You called me," Marjorie blinked. "Darlene called you." Claire took both of her mother's hands. "That counts." Darlene stood nearby, arms folded, wearing the satisfied expression of a retired nurse who had successfully interfered in someone's bad habit. Marjorie tried to look stern. "I was going to tell you later. You say that about everything," Claire replied, but her voice broke around the edges. "The roof leak, the dizzy spells, the porch steps, the smoke alarm battery. That battery was only chirping occasionally. It chirped for 3 weeks. Earl Hanratty, still at his booth, muttered, 'That's a war crime.'" Marjorie gave him a look. "I heard that. Good," Earl said. "Means you're recovering." The room laughed gently. Alden watched Claire press her forehead against her mother's hands. That small gesture did something to him. It was not dramatic. No speech, no music, no grand forgiveness. Just a daughter refusing to let pride keep standing between them. Vesper rose. Alden glanced down, expecting the dog to move toward the door. Instead, Vesper walked to Marjorie's chair and lowered his head near her purse. He sniffed once, then nudged the red medication pouch closer to Claire's knee. Claire looked at it. Marjorie looked away. Inside the pouch, tucked behind the prescription label, was a folded card. It must have slipped loose when Darlene helped earlier. Claire opened it carefully. The handwriting was Marjorie's, small and shaky. "If I say I am fine too many times, call Claire." For a moment, no one spoke. Marjorie covered her eyes with one hand. "I wrote that after Thanksgiving." Claire's lips trembled. "Why didn't you give it to anyone?" Marjorie whispered. "Because writing the truth was easier than letting someone read it." Alden felt those words move through the cafe like wind through pine branches. Vesper sat between mother and daughter, quiet as a judge and tender as a prayer. Alden turned slightly toward the window, giving them privacy, though the sentence stayed with him. There were truths he had written in no notebook, carried on no card, spoken to no one. There were nights when Vesper had read him anyway, A few minutes later, the EMTs helped Marjorie toward the ambulance for further evaluation. Claire walked beside her, one hand at her mother's back. Before stepping outside, Marjorie stopped and looked at Alden. "If your dog had not held that door," she said, "I might not have had the chance to call my daughter today." Alden looked at Vesper. "He has a habit of making decisions people understand late." Marjorie smiled. "That sounds like marriage." Claire laughed through tears. When Marjorie reached Vesper, Alden gave a quiet nod. The German shepherd lowered his head, and Marjorie touched the golden streak between his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Vesper blinked slowly, accepting gratitude the way good dogs accept weather. Outside, Captain Lorna Vale stood near a dark police SUV, while Brent Galloway waited beside the passenger door of another cruiser. He looked smaller without his duty belt, less like authority, and more like a man learning the weight of it. Before leaving, Brent walked toward Alden. Lena Cross watched from a few steps away, but she did not interfere. The young deputy's notebook was closed now. Her eyes remained open. Brent stopped in front of Alden. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his pride visibly wounded, but no longer driving the vehicle. "I said sorry in there," he said, "but I said it like a man trying to get past the moment." Alden did not answer. Brent looked at Vesper, then back at Alden. "I was wrong before I ever touched the cuffs. I decided what you were because of how you looked. I decided what he was because he was big. I decided what Colton was because he sounded offended. I let the loudest fear tell me where to look. The apology was clumsy. That made it better." Alden nodded once. "Then remember that. I will. You'll want to forget. Shame likes to turn into excuses once nobody is watching." Brent's eyes lowered. "I know. Don't let it." Brent looked up. "Yes, sir." Alden gave no speech of forgiveness. He only extended his hand. Brent stared at it for half a second, then shook it carefully. That was enough. Near another cruiser, Colton Sayers sat in the back seat behind the glass. His face was turned toward Vesper. He was no longer smiling. When the officer opened the door to adjust the cuffs before transport, Colton looked at Alden. "Does that dog hate me?" he asked, voice low. Alden followed his gaze to Vesper. "No," Alden said. "Dogs don't waste their lives hating, but they remember what needs remembering." Colton swallowed. The door closed. The cruiser pulled away through the snow. Earl came over next, cap in hand. His recovered wallet was clipped securely to his belt now, the broken chain replaced by a spare carabiner Molly had found in a drawer. "If I see a quiet man with a big dog again," Earl said, "I'll try not to assume he's trouble." Alden's mouth twitched. "Try hard. I will." Earl glanced at Vesper. "Might assume he's judging my breakfast, though." Vesper gave a long, unimpressed sigh. "See," Earl said. "Already started." Alden finally moved toward his truck. The old black pickup waited beneath a dusting of snow. The forest beyond the lot was turning blue with evening. Paula stood in the doorway. Molly waved from behind her. Darlene lifted 2 fingers in a nurse's farewell that looked suspiciously like an order to take care of himself. Lena watched quietly, one hand resting on the closed notebook in her pocket. Alden opened the passenger door. Vesper jumped in, turned once, and settled on the seat. Before climbing behind the wheel, Alden looked back at the Blue Spruce Cafe. That morning, it had been a place to stop for coffee. By evening, it had become something stranger and holier. A little roadside sanctuary where several people had learned that kindness required courage, truth required witnesses, and judgment was a door too many people closed from the wrong side. He got in and started the engine. For a long while, neither man nor dog moved to leave. Then Alden pulled onto the highway. The pines slid past the windows in dark rows. Snow whispered under the tires. The last light of day stretched across the road ahead like a pale ribbon leading home. Vesper placed his head on Alden's thigh. Alden looked down. "Next time we use the drive-thru." Vesper exhaled through his nose, clearly opposed. Alden smiled. Then, for the second time that day, he laughed. It was small, but it was real. A little flame in an old house. A match struck against the long wall of winter. His leave was not the end of service. He understood that now. There would be no radio orders in the morning, no uniform inspection, no mission brief, but there were still things worth guarding. An old woman's tomorrow, a young deputy's courage, a manager's humility, a thief's consequence, a waitress's voice, a tired man's heart. And beside him there was still Vesper, a guardian with 4 wet paws, a worn service vest, and eyes that never mistook silence for emptiness. Sometimes a life was not saved by thunder. Sometimes it was saved by a dog sitting at a door, waiting for human beings to become brave enough to see. In the end, Alden and Vesper remind us that heroes do not always arrive with loud voices, shining uniforms, or perfect timing. Sometimes they walk into an ordinary roadside cafe covered in snow, tired from a long road, carrying wounds no one can see. This story teaches us a simple but powerful lesson. Never judge a person by the coat they wear, the silence they keep, or the scars they refuse to explain. Alden looked like a tired stranger, but inside him lived discipline, mercy, and courage. Vesper looked like just a dog sitting by a door, but in that quiet moment, he became the guardian of truth. And perhaps that is how God often works in our daily lives, not always through thunder, not always through grand miracles, but through small signs we almost miss. A loyal dog refusing to move, a stranger choosing patience over anger, a frightened woman finally accepting help, a room full of people learning to look again before they judge. Every day, we pass people carrying invisible battles. The elderly neighbor who says she is fine, the veteran who sits quietly in the corner, the young worker afraid to speak up, the stranger who may be standing between someone else and harm. If we listen with more kindness, if we pause before judging, we may become part of the miracle someone has been praying for. May this story remind us that love is not always loud, courage is not always violent, faith is not always seen at first glance. Sometimes grace enters the room on four paws, sits beside the door, and waits for human hearts to open. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who believes in loyalty, second chances, and the quiet miracles God places in everyday life. Let us know in the comments where you are watching from, and tell us about a loyal animal who changed your life. Please subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories of courage, faith, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. May God bless you, protect your family, and bring peace to every heart watching today.